They say your whole world changes the moment you become a mother. For me it did too, but not for the reasons I ever expected. The moment my husband, Ethan Williams, looked at our newborn son for the first time, I knew something wasn't right. It wasn't the way he smiled or cried or reached out for him. It was the complete absence of any of that. Instead, he stared at Oliver, my perfect tiny baby, and said, "We need a DNA test immediately." The room fell dead silent. Then, with the most casual smirk, he added, "He's too good-looking to be mine." It was as though the air had been sucked out of the room. I sat there, still in my hospital bed, holding my newborn son, just hours after labor, and for a moment I couldn't breathe. My arms instinctively tightened around him, his skin still soft and slightly pink. His tiny fingers curled into a fist near his cheek. He made a little cooing noise, blissfully unaware of the silence that followed his father's words. At first I laughed, because what else do you do when the man you've been married to for 4 years says something so absurd? But no one else joined in. One of the nurses chuckled awkwardly, more out of discomfort than amusement. My mom, who had been scrolling through her phone near the window, suddenly stiffened. "Ethan," I said, trying to keep my voice light, "what are you even talking about?" He didn't laugh. He just stood there, arms crossed, looking at Oliver like he was trying to solve a puzzle. His eyes narrowed slightly, and that stupid smirk never left his face. "I'm just saying, look at him," he shrugged. "Those eyes, that hair, that little chin dimple. I mean, come on, there's no way he got all the good genes." I felt my cheeks flush, not from the compliment but from the implication. My chest tightened like a rope slowly pulling tighter around my lungs. I tried to laugh again, but it came out thin. "So what, you're serious? You actually want a test?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Ethan walked closer to the bed and leaned down to look at Oliver. "Just to be sure," he said, like we were talking about checking the oil in a car, not questioning the paternity of our newborn son. I felt a slow burn crawl up my neck, my hands trembling as I shifted Oliver in my arms, cradling him closer to my chest. His warmth was the only thing grounding me in that moment. From the corner of my eye, I saw my mom rise from her chair, arms folded tightly across her chest. Her mouth pressed into a thin line. She didn't say a word, but I knew exactly what she was thinking. She never trusted Ethan, not fully, and maybe in that moment I didn't either. I looked at my husband, the man who had held my hand through every appointment, who had painted the nursery pale green, and told me we'd name our son after his grandfather, and I saw someone else. Someone cold, detached, suspicious, covering all the bases. He said again with a shrug, like it was no big deal. But it was a big deal. As suddenly everything felt different. The room, the joy, even Oliver's soft breathing. It was all undercut by the shadow Ethan had cast. Why did his words hurt so much? Wasn't I enough? Didn't he trust me? I didn't have the answers yet, but I knew one thing. This moment should have been beautiful. And instead, it was the beginning of something I never saw coming. After Ethan's comment, everything changed, not just in the room but inside me. You would think that after giving birth, your thoughts would be consumed by the baby, counting fingers and toes, memorizing their little size, falling in love over and over every time they blinked. But instead, I couldn't stop thinking about him, Ethan, and what he said. We were discharged 2 days later, and my mom insisted on staying with us for a while to help. But I knew she didn't trust Ethan alone with me. I told her she was being dramatic. She didn't argue, she just gave me that look, tight-lipped, eyes soft with concern. Ethan, on the other hand, acted like everything was normal. He didn't bring up the DNA test again, not once. He changed diapers, made jokes, even took selfies with Oliver for Instagram, writing captions like, "Already got my mini-me." I tried to let it go, to convince myself it had been a stupid joke said at the worst possible moment. But something inside me started to ache. A quiet, gnawing kind of ache. The kind you can't point to but you feel in your bones. It wasn't just the comment. It was how he looked at Oliver sometimes, like he was trying to figure him out. I caught him one night standing over the crib just staring. He didn't notice me watching. His brow was furrowed, his eyes squinting a little, like he was searching for something he couldn't quite find. When I stepped into the room, he jolted slightly and laughed it off. "Just wondering when he's going to start looking like me," he said. I smiled, but something about his tone made my skin prickle. Little things started happening. Things I might have ignored if I wasn't already on edge. A nurse from the hospital, Hannah Cooper, I think her name was, called one afternoon saying they were doing a routine follow-up. Her voice was polite, But I swear I caught a strange hesitation when she asked for Oliver's hospital ID number. I gave it to her and she paused for a beat before saying, "Everything is fine." I asked if something was wrong but she quickly said no. The way she said it didn't sit right with me. As the days passed, I tried to bury the unease gnawing at me. I had just given birth to my beautiful son Oliver, and I should have been basking in the joy of his arrival, but every time I looked at him, something was off. It wasn't just Ethan's comment. It was the way he looked at Oliver sometimes, the way he seemed to be examining him like he was waiting for a sign that Oliver would somehow look like him. One evening as I was feeding Oliver, I noticed Ethan in the kitchen standing in front of the counter staring into space. His phone was in his hand but he wasn't looking at it, just staring blankly. When I walked in, he quickly shoved it into his pocket and smiled at me, but it wasn't a smile that reached his eyes. "Everything okay?" I asked, trying to sound casual, though 1,000 questions swirled in my mind. "Yeah," he said quickly, but it sounded too rehearsed. "Just thinking about work stuff." I nodded, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. It wasn't just this moment. It was the accumulation of little things. The way he changed the subject whenever I tried to talk about our future or Oliver's health. The way he always seemed distracted, distant. The next day, I got another call from Hannah Cooper, the nurse who had spoken to me about Oliver's hospital records. This time, her voice was different. It was softer, almost cautious. "Sophia, I just wanted to follow up on a few things," she said, hesitating. I noticed a slight discrepancy when I was reviewing Oliver's records. His wristband number didn't quite match yours. It was just one digit off, but I wanted to make sure everything was okay. I froze. My heart raced as I tried to keep my voice steady. "Is that normal? A mistake in the system?" "It happens sometimes," she said quickly, "but I just thought you should know." I didn't know what to make of it, but I couldn't ignore the feeling that something was terribly wrong. That evening, I pulled up Oliver's hospital records and began combing through every detail. The wristband, the birth certificate, even the ultrasound. Everything seemed normal at first, but then I noticed the same thing that Hannah had mentioned. One digit in the hospital ID number was wrong. I stared at the paper in my hands, feeling my heart pound in my chest. Could it really be a mistake? Or had something happened at the hospital that I hadn't been told about? I spent hours on the phone with different hospital departments, trying to get some clarity, but no one could give me a straight answer. I felt like I was chasing shadows. And all the while, Ethan remained oblivious, or at least he pretended to be. Days turned into weeks and I found myself obsessing over the smallest details. The numbers. The little inconsistencies in Ethan's story. The way he avoided certain conversations. I started going through his things, anything I could find that might explain what was happening. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was missing something big. I dug through his old yearbooks, his high school memorabilia, and even went through his social media accounts. But there was a gap. There were no photos of him from childhood, no school photos, no birthday pictures. The only things I found were a few adult IDs, a college diploma. Nothing from his early life. One night, I finally confronted him about it. "Why is there no record of you before college?" I asked, holding up the yearbook, the evidence laid out in front of him. "Where are your childhood photos? Your memories?" Ethan's face went still. He glanced at the yearbook for a moment, then back at me, his expression tight. "I told you," he said, his voice defensive. "My mom burned everything when I was a kid. I didn't keep any of it." But something about his tone, his eyes, it didn't add up. Why hadn't he ever mentioned this before? "I don't remember you telling me that," I said, my voice shaky. "And if you really didn't have anything, why is it that I'm just finding out now?" Ethan didn't answer. He turned away, walked out of the room, and I was left standing there, feeling like I was losing my grip on reality. I couldn't ignore the feeling that something was horribly wrong anymore. I tried to convince myself that I was overreacting, that it was just the stress of new motherhood, but every time I looked at Ethan, I saw a stranger. I saw the man I had married, but I also saw someone hiding something. A man with secrets I wasn't sure I wanted to uncover. Finally, after days of sleepless nights and unbearable tension, Ethan brought it up again. Not with anger, not with an argument, but casually, like it was just another task to check off. "Maybe we should just get the DNA test done," he said over coffee one morning, his tone too calm. "I found a private clinic that does same-day testing. They're discreet, reliable." I looked at him, the words sinking in. "You're still thinking about this? After everything?" He shrugged, nonchalant. It'll just give us both peace of mind. It'll help you too. I didn't know what terrified me more. The fact that he was still insistent on this test, or that I was beginning to doubt everything I knew about him. About us. The phone rang early the next morning. I was standing in the kitchen rocking Oliver in my arms when I saw the number on the screen. Unknown caller. My heart skipped a beat. Something about the unknown number, the urgency of it, made my stomach twist. Hello. Mrs. Williams, the voice on the other end said, calm and clipped. This is Dr. Lawson from Greenbrook Medical. We need you and your husband to come in today to discuss the results of your paternity test. In person. I froze, the blood draining from my face. In person? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Yes, it's urgent, Dr. Lawson replied. I hung up the phone, my hands trembling. When I told Ethan, he didn't ask any questions. He just grabbed his keys and headed for the door, his face unreadable. The drive to the clinic was silent. The car hummed softly, the only sound filling the space between us. Ethan didn't speak and I didn't either. I kept my eyes fixed on the road, my thoughts a tangled mess of fear and disbelief. Every now and then I would glance at him, but each time, I was met with the same distant, unreadable look. When we arrived at the clinic, we were led into a small, sterile room. The air smelled like disinfectant, and the digital clock on the wall ticked loudly, each second that passed feeling like an eternity. Dr. Lawson entered the room a few minutes later. He was middle-aged, with gray hair at his temples and a no-nonsense demeanor. He sat across from us, opened a file and paused just long enough for my chest to tighten. I could feel the weight of his gaze on me before he even spoke. I'm going to be direct, he said, his voice calm but serious. The results came back and they are highly unusual. My heart skipped a beat. I clutched Oliver tighter in my arms, feeling his warmth as an anchor to reality. Biologically, this child is not related to Ethan, Dr. Lawson continued, looking at me first. I didn't even blink. Somewhere deep inside I had already known that. But then Dr. Lawson turned to Ethan. His eyes lingered for just a moment and something passed across his face. Hesitation, maybe even fear. Ethan, Dr. Lawson said, his voice quieter now. You are not a biological match for this child. But more importantly, your DNA doesn't match any records associated with the ID you submitted. I turned slowly toward Ethan, expecting confusion, denial, or shock. But his face didn't change. There was no surprise, no anger, just stillness. Not even a twitch. Dr. Lawson continued, unfazed. We ran a cross-check through our internal system. Your name, your date of birth, even your photo, all of it triggered a federal alert. A cold wave of terror washed over me. I couldn't breathe. My mind raced, trying to process what I had just heard. What are you saying? I whispered. What does that mean? Dr. Lawson didn't answer directly. He picked up the phone on his desk, pressed a button and calmly said, Security, we need you in room 4 immediately. It felt like time stopped. My head spun and I looked over at Ethan, or whoever he was. His face had gone pale and for the first time I saw the tiniest flicker in his eyes. Panic. Just for a second and then it was gone. What the hell is going on? I breathed, my voice cracking. Ethan, or David as I would soon learn, stood up, the look of anger suddenly replacing the calm facade. This is ridiculous, he snapped. You think I'm some kind of, what, con artist? He glanced at Dr. Lawson, his hands balled into fists. I'm not who you think I am. But Dr. Lawson didn't flinch. We don't think. Your DNA matched a man named David Langston, arrested in 2014. He disappeared shortly after posting bail. The real Ethan Williams died in a car accident the following year. We're not sure how long you've been living under his name, but you've been using his identity for quite some time. I felt the room spin around me. The man I had married, the father of my child, wasn't even the person I thought he was. He wasn't Ethan Williams, he was David Langston, a man with a criminal past. 2 uniformed security guards entered the room, and I watched as they approached Ethan, now David, calmly but with purpose. My heart pounded in my chest as I watched them handcuff him. He didn't fight it. He didn't resist. He just stood there, his face a mask of sadness as the guards led him away. It hit me all at once. My world, my marriage, my entire reality was a lie. This man, this stranger, had been living under Ethan Williams' name for years. and I had fallen in love with a lie. In the days that followed, nothing felt real. The life I had built with Ethan, the man I had loved, had been nothing but a carefully constructed facade. The betrayal cut deeper than any physical wound could. I tried to process everything. The moment they took David away, I felt numb. I didn't cry. I couldn't. The tears didn't come until much later, when I was alone in my bed, holding Oliver close, trying to find some semblance of comfort in his tiny, innocent presence. The media caught wind of the story, and soon the headlines were everywhere. Man living under stolen identity arrested in bizarre paternity case. Reporters called, but I didn't answer. The world had turned into a nightmare, and I didn't know how to wake up from it. There was one thing that kept me going, though. Oliver. My beautiful son. He wasn't a part of this lie. He was mine. And in that, I found a small piece of peace. David's actions had shaken me to my core, but they couldn't take away the love I had for Oliver. That was real. In the weeks that followed, I moved back in with my mother. She didn't judge me, not once. She just held me when I needed it, and she loved Oliver like he was her own. The process of rebuilding wasn't easy. It felt like starting from scratch. My whole life, my whole identity had been tied up in the man I thought I knew. And now I had to learn who I was again. I wasn't just Ethan's wife. I was Megan Williams, a mother to Oliver, and I had to move forward. But with each passing day, I found strength I never knew I had. Oliver needed me. And for him, I was determined to rise above the pain. In the weeks that followed, I moved back in with my mother. She didn't judge me, not once. She just held me when I needed it, and she loved Oliver like he was her own. The process of rebuilding wasn't easy. It felt like starting from scratch. My whole life, my whole identity had been tied up in the man I thought I knew. And now I had to learn who I was again. I wasn't just Ethan's wife. I was Megan Williams, a mother to Oliver, and I had to move forward. But with each passing day, I found strength I never knew I had. Oliver needed me. And for him, I was determined to rise above the pain. As time went on, I learned to live with the scars David had left behind. I would never forget the man I thought I loved. The man who never truly existed. But I had Oliver. And in him, I found the courage to heal, to move forward, and to build a new life. Sometimes, late at night, when the house was quiet and Oliver was asleep, I would think about the man who had once held me and told me everything would be okay. But now I knew better. I couldn't rely on anyone else for my happiness. I had to rely on myself. And on Oliver. We were enough. And together we would be okay.